inspections. So I think it was every 2 years go to regulatory factories for inspections.
Why they want the government to make the recall instead of the company? Why the Korean government want to do that?
I think because it took Samsung 10 days initially
It's
to
too
recall.
long.
Yeah. So instead of having such a huge gap, right, maybe they could have prevented it sooner, had a recall
But
sooner.
the Korean government, they are going to make a global recall or just a recall in Korea?
I think it would be just for Korea.
Because I think one of the issue was U.S. was on the recall, Korea was not. Right, so it was not being, it was stopped selling in the U.S., but Korea they kept selling.
Yeah.
I think that if I recall, is one of the reasons. Just because the big governments like Samsung has
Right.
enormous power
Right.
in Korea.
So UL is an example of an organization that has lithium-ion testing protocols. However, manufacturers are not required to incorporate standards into their products. There's no federal law requiring manufacturers to go through any sort of regulation. So then this asks the question, does this really protect consumer safety? How can you tell that a product is actually safe? And then this also leads to another question saying, is there a responsibility on retailers to do anything about it? So in the timeline, Sean was explaining that wireless providers like AT&T and T-Mobile halted their sales. Should these types of retailers also have a responsibility when it comes to safety?
Yes. What, Lizzie?
Oh, sorry. So then we looked at the consumer viewpoint. So especially with electronics and phones, consumers are constantly being bombarded with new devices. So what's going to be the next big thing? And there's a lot of expectations for a better phone, longer battery life, stuff like that. And there's a very short life cycle rate, especially with Samsung. They always try to bring out new phones to the market. So then when you look at what people actually pay attention to when they look for phones, a lot of it is a longer battery life, the visuals, stuff like that. No one really asks about safety. So when it does come to safety, consumers really rely on the media for that. So once there actually is a big issue, that's when the media talks about it, and that's when people find out.
Except for cars. Because if you look at Volvo has put, the way they sell is they advertise for safety, and the people who buy Volvo, they buy it not because of its performance safety. So in automobile industry, safety has been, but not in the electronic and the right.
So then we kind of had a couple questions for you guys. So when you guys go into your local AT&T or Verizon, do you guys know what standards apply to your phones?
Good
Anyone?
question.
So then what makes you believe that your phone is safe?
That's a good point. Very good.
Does anyone have any?
It's this Apple.
Appearance.
What?
Appearance. Look.
Appearance. Look safe.
Yeah.
If there aren't any exposed wires, I'm assuming you can't shock me.
Sure. Michelle?
It all comes down to what you said about the media. Like, if everyone I know has an Apple iPhone, then I'm going to be like, oh, well, I'll just get an Apple iPhone too, right? And, like, it's not like anyone on TV is like, oh, you know, don't get this because of XYZ until the Samsung case came out, right? And so
I
you just
think-
go because
yeah,
everyone else
good
gets
point.
it,
And
yeah.
I also feel media and advertisements, how we are bombarded with different advertisements. So
But the other
different
part is that automobile industry, as an example, is a very mature industry.
True,
They
yeah.
have 100 years of experience. iPhone and these things, technology is moving fast, and
Yeah.
especially the battery technology didn't change for last 30 years ago it was the same for 70. In the last 20 years, 30 years, a lot of these are all new way of making batteries. So it's moving fast, and they trying to, as you said, give more lifetime, and they rush into the market.
Right.
So it's not as mature as the others.
Hmm.
As more laptops start burning, people will ask about the safety of electronics.
Mhm.
So now that we are really getting to the consumers, we have to ask, why are they not really involved in the discussion based on the safety? And because all of these organizations, they are open to the public. Anyone can join. There's no restriction. But there is still a gap between these big stockholders, these sort of experts in the field, and everyday users who are just making it through with the products that they're standardizing.
Because
So
old batteries were safe. Old batteries were safe. These newer batteries have these problems. So people, I think in future will ask this question.
hopefully. So we're just trying to figure out how the public can be more connected to this world of creating standards that we are all in contact with on a daily basis. So there's a few things that we would like to see go into this this industry. So the first thing has to do with when it comes to a product that is going to be recalled, because no matter how great you make the standards and how modern they are, there are still going to be issues where the products are causing problems. Like even that it even happens with products certified by UL. There was a type of fan that was certified, but it was still recalled because it was seen to explode. So we would like to see more guidelines to bring to the customer from the manufacturer on how these recalls are really being made and making them as public as possible. Because from the Samsung case, they like did get the recall out, but even on their website, their social media, it wasn't their top story. They weren't really, it like wasn't like they were trying to just like advertise it out to the world, like, hey, our phones are not safe. So, which is a problem that it's a necessary thing to do. We would also like to increase the community outreach from the standards organizations to these normal consumers. So it's really about bringing them what these standards are really bringing to the phones and how it really differentiates the uncertified batteries to the certified, and like what it really means to have actual certified batteries, and all those strange numbers and markings on the back of your phones actually make them worthwhile that look for observing. And more student programs to get more people involved in the standards world, such as this one, and to make it less intimidating for these people to even try and get into the world of standards making. And finally, it would be very beneficial if the manufacturers took a stance in this as well, and really work together to bring these standards to light, based through advertising and marketing and the mainstream media. If it was brought there would create a big divide between these companies that are really showing that they are safe and they are following standards and what it really means, and those companies that are not. So hopefully that might spur a more of a movement in the industry to really become more safety centric.
Wow.
Question? Yeah.
It's popping in here.
So
Let's
I
go.
think before I forget, I felt a little bit misled by the talk, and I feel there's a missed opportunity because I would say 90% of the talk was basically a case study of sensory recall, not about batteries. There's a lot of issues with batteries that's supposedly covered, right? So hoverboards have been known to explode and cause fires. The recent explosion of headphone that someone took on board. So if you sort of step back, there's a general issue about batteries which wasn't covered, whereas you sort of spend the issue on Samsung recall. But there are specific issues with Samsung recall. So for example, that wasn't also covered. That was interesting. So one of the things that Samsung did or didn't do was they announced a global recall by themselves without working with the Consumer Safety Product Commission, right? The Consumer Safety Product Commission is in charge of the recall process, and that's the reason why people were left flummoxed. They would go back to Verizon, try to return this, and they won't accept it. right? Because while Samsung announced on TV, there was no process in place, whereas the, Consumer Safety Product Commission is the right place to do it. So that's the big mistake. The other mistake was, I believe, Samsung used internal, essentially, process to validate the battery, as opposed to what's typical is you would have an external, right, to
Yeah, like
get rid of
killer,
essentially bias,
Yeah.
to sort of test out, products and so on. So, I mean, there are internal process issues that's interesting, but the way you set up your initial talk was about battery issues, which I feel like wasn't really covered
So,
as
yeah.
it should have.
So the first part of your question in terms of the hoverboards and the headphones